Hello and welcome to episode 2, part 2 of episode 1, whichever you want to call it, of the podcast Paradis, where we're going to be talking about the Western Conference. And in typical podcast Paradis tradition that has been going on for 2 episodes, we got to talk about Paradis. Today we are in lovely Long Island, New York yet again. Looking out at the night sky. Look, it's nice. We're right in smack dab in the middle of October, which is, I think, one of the best months of the year. I talked about this a little bit, but yeah, there's just something about the vibe in October. The Halloween movies are on TV. The commercials even on YouTube for scary movies kind of get me in the mood. And the 20th anniversary of Halloween, I don't know, it kind of has me wanting to watch scary movies. I watched Shaun of the Dead a couple weeks ago. That's a fantastic movie if you've never seen it. But anyways, without further ado, the NBA's Western Conference for the 2018-2019 NBA season. Started off right from the beginning. 15... I think the lowest seed in the West is going to be Sacramento. Not too many surprises there. They seem to be the only team in the West that thinks that they're bad, which definitely doesn't help their cause, but they're not trying to win. Every other team in the West is good, pretty much. The West, it's... At the top, it's not as loaded as it has been in other seasons. Like the 13-14 season comes to mind where, what was it? I think it was 49 wins was what it took Dallas to get the 8 seed that year. And what was it? The top 6 seeds were all mid-50 win teams. That was an insane conference. But this year, there's not as many really good teams, but there's just a lot of good teams, and everyone's around this 40 to 50 wins range, and they're all trying to make the playoffs. And Sacramento seems to be the one team, rightfully so, that is just kind of comfortable with taking a back seat and letting their young talent develop, which, I mean, good on them. It's one of the only good organizational decisions they've made in the last not 20 years yet, but 15 years for sure. That we don't need to pile on Sacramento. We all know about the Kings. Next up, I think Phoenix probably is 14. They're trying to win. They signed Trevor Ariza, stole him away from the Rockets for a ton of money. I've heard the conspiracy theory, though, that they're just going to buy him out by the end of the season and he's going to go back to the Rockets, which, if that happens, that's hilarious. But they've got DeAndre Ayton, who is a heavy favorite for Rookie of the Year. Not heavy favorite, but he's one of the two who everyone kind of says, yeah, these are the two headliners for Rookie of the Year. And he looks great so far. What did he put up? A triple-double with 28 points or something insane like that in the preseason. I mean, not to put too much stock in preseason, but he looks NBA ready for sure. And he's kind of one of those guys where in college, because his team was always playing with 2 bigs, he never really got to flourish. But in the NBA, where teams are going to be going small, he's going to be perfect. He really is a perfect fit for the modern NBA big man rotation. And they've got a lot of young players, right? Devin Booker, Josh Jackson, who we still don't know if he's good yet. The problem is, though, is they don't really have an answer at point guard, which is the most important position. They're probably not going to be good on defense, even though they have Ariza. Even though they have Jackson, I'm just not totally sure what the team does super well. They're going to be fun, I think. Watching Ayton and Jackson kind of exert their athleticism on other teams, that should be fun. And Devin Booker, while I'm not as high on him as I think some people are, he's really good. He's going to be a future All-Star, most definitely, I would say. And he's fun. He shoots a lot. Doesn't play much defense, but yeah, he's a fun player. They have no shot at the playoffs in this West. They just don't have much of a chance, even though they're going to be trying for it. Next, I would say, is Dallas. And Dallas and Phoenix, I had kind of a hard time choosing between them because they're both kind of in the same situation where they have veteran players. They seem like they want to win, but overall they're just not good enough. Oh, and I forgot, obviously, Dallas has the other headliner for Rookie of the Year, Luka Doncic. It's going to be interesting. I think the most interesting thing about both of these teams is which one of their prized rookies actually ends up winning the award. And I don't see any way in which it's not one of these two, to be honest, unless they both get hurt miraculously. But, yeah, they both look so good for rookies. Doncic is so smart already. I'm sure everybody's seen that move that lit up NBA Twitter, where he kind of goes behind the back, and what happens? He has that like high arcing floater way off the top of the glass that just kind of kisses right in. I'm sure if you're listening to this, you've seen that. Yeah, he looks like he's going to be a lot of fun. They have DeAndre Jordan, who that's the thing that made me think this team is going to be better than Phoenix, because they have Luka Doncic, they have DeAndre Jordan, who wasn't as good last year, but I kind of get the vibe that's because he wasn't really trying, and that in Dallas, under Carlisle, for Dirk, I just kind of get the vibe that he's going to try a little harder, even if I don't think he is the same athlete that he was, 3 years ago. But just because that, and because they have kind of a role man to pair with Doncic, it just feels kind of perfect. And I do think, other than Stevens, and maybe it's because I'm a bit biased, but I think other than Stevens, Rick Carlisle is the best in-game coach in the NBA. If you hear like scouts talk about him, it's just kind of like in awe. They're like, dude, you don't know what this guy's going to do game to game. He plans specifically for your team in the regular season, which is like unheard of, because he's like very meticulous, little details where he kind of almost totally changes the way his teams play game to game in the regular season to fit the opponent, which no one does until the playoffs. Who the fuck does that? So yeah, I just think this team's gonna be good. They're gonna be decent. They're gonna be fun too. Phoenix and Dallas both, but again, neither of them really have much of a shot at the playoffs. And that kind of ends the tier of forgettable teams, because already from 12 to, I'd say, 5 in the West is just a bloodbath of all these teams that are about as good as the next. Whether you're talking about Minnesota, San Antonio, the Lakers, Portland, New Orleans, Denver, the Clippers, Memphis. It is just a slog. I think they're all going to be around the same tier. And so what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to skip them for now and come back to them, because I know that's the most interesting part of the West by far, is that race. So I'm just going to skip over that, and we're going to do the top 4 and come back to that later. So 4, I think it's going to be Oklahoma City. They only won, I think, 47 last year, but they don't have Carmelo anymore, which honestly you can make the argument that he was more of a harm. He was more harmful than good. But they still have Russell Westbrook, who it's unclear how much he really helps you win. And it's unclear if he's even the best player on his own team, because he plays so out of control, so irrationally. The fact that he doesn't do anything when he doesn't have the ball, the fact that he seems preoccupied with numbers, the fact that he doesn't really he tries on defense, but he doesn't. He's like John Wall on steroids. He doesn't follow the scheme whatsoever. And I'll never forget that first round 2016 OKC versus Dallas. That should have been a sweep. That should have been an OKC sweep. And it went 6, I think, because Westbrook was just a complete disaster defending the pick and roll. He was really, really awful. And he's not always that bad, but he's never really good. He's just always so ADD, and he's moving around, and it's almost like he has like this weird thing where he just turns his brain all the way up to 10, and he's like a kid on coke, and he's just sprinting around the court, and he just can't turn it off and be disciplined. Like, if he's playing with the same thing that gives him the full energy and effort to go 110% every single game, every possession, always be sprinting, never get tired, that same little like chip in his brain that he dials up to unlock that part of his game. And I mean, that's the part that does make him so special. But when he dials that up, he also loses like his brain power and his ability to like slow down and make sound decisions and play within the offense and follow the schemes on defense. So yeah, it's unclear how much he really helps you, but I mean, he's a superstar. There's 8 guys in the league with superstar who have the talent to have superstar talent, and he's one of them. He's one of the 8. He's pretty clearly the least valuable of the 8, very obviously. And again, he might be like the 20th most valuable player in the league. I mean, Haralabos Voulgaris was all over that on Twitter during the playoffs last year, but I believe in superstar talent. I think if you have one of the 8, that's really helpful, and he's one of the 8. And then they have a secondary star too, Paul George, who again might actually be more valuable than Westbrook. But yeah, that doesn't I mean, it doesn't help their cause, but they have 2 awesome players. 2 are like the best 12 in the league, you might say, somewhere around there. Paul George is really good. He had a bad showing in the playoffs, but again, to all the people who want to say Paul George is a choker and that he doesn't play well in the playoffs and that he got shut down by Joe Ingles. First of all, Joe Ingles is actually a really good defender, and you're only saying that because you don't watch him and you're just looking at his body. Second, Paul George, the trend throughout his entire career, going from like literally 2011 probably. I think he was even good in the 11 playoffs in the first round against the Bulls. I think he kind of broke out then too, but definitely was 2012. He was awesome against Miami. 2013, he was a killer. He was going toe-to-toe with LeBron. 2014, he was lights out early in the regular season, but then he faltered and then turned it up in the playoffs. And he had that one game against the Heat. I think it was game 5 where he was just unstoppable. He was absolutely lighting them up. 2015, he was hurt and they didn't make the playoffs. 2016, tears apart Toronto. 2017, duels LeBron. Every year until 2018, he exceeded his regular season play in the playoffs by a lot. So I don't want to hear the whole notion that Paul George is a choker. I really don't. And again, even in 2018, he did have that one, out of the 6 games, he had that one. I think it was game 1, right, where he was just incandescent. He was hitting every shot. But regardless, they have 2 stars. They have Steven Adams, who I think is really good. He's a really good tertiary player. And he, early in that series against the Jazz, he was kind of manhandling Gobert, which I thought was so impressive because, I mean, Gobert is a behemoth. And Steven Adams just out-toughed him for a while. I love Steven Adams. He's one of my favorites. You can win with that guy as your starting center, for sure. And then the thing is you got to remember last year, one of the things that was so central to their identity early in the season was like, okay, they got to figure out the offense, and Westbrook and George and Carmelo, they kind of got to figure out something here, but we know that they can fall back on the fact that they're an elite defensive team. And then Andre Robertson went down, and they lost that. Now, I'm not so into the idea that some of like the hardcore stat nerds were proclaiming last season, like David Locke. I remember he was saying this. He was a big proponent of this last year. Is Andre Robertson as valuable as a superstar is offensively on defense? And, because he uses the argument like, oh, yeah, they fell apart on that end without him. And I don't think it's so much that Robertson is like this god on defense who single-handedly props up your defense to elite levels. But he is the kind of player Oklahoma City's the kind of team where they had Robertson, they had George, they had Adams. You have 2 elite perimeter defenders and 1 elite big man. And I remember B-Ball Breakdown, actually. I just thought of this now. B-Ball Breakdown did this video like 4 or 5 years ago breaking down the fact that all the elite defensive teams in the NBA at the time, I think it was like the Spurs, the Bulls, the Warriors, Indiana, and I forget the 5th one. But he broke down how all these teams, their elite defense, they were the best defensive teams in the NBA. They all had a vulnerability at point guard, a point guard who was below average on D, and a power forward who was below average on D. And he broke down like, yeah, if you just have 2 awesome perimeter defenders and 1 awesome interior defender, whether it's Jimmy Butler and Luol Deng on the perimeter and Joakim Noah on the inside, whether it's Kawhi Leonard and Danny Green on the perimeter and Tim Duncan on the inside, you can make up for weaknesses like David Lee or Tony Parker or Carlos Boozer. The David Lee thing, because the Warriors, they had Lee and Curry, and obviously the great defenders who covered for them were Clay, Iguodala, and Bogut. And that's kind of what Oklahoma City had, where they just had 2 guys on the perimeter and Robertson and George, 1 awesome interior defender in Steven Adams, and then they could kind of cover, just kind of because of how good those 3 were and how they kind of could cover every position on the floor. You could cover for Westbrook not following the scheme. You could cover for Carmelo being Carmelo. But once he went down, it was just, oof. We have 1 great perimeter defender, 1 great interior defender, and then holes. And so it's not to say Robertson is like one of the 5 most valuable players in the league, but he was really valuable to that team. And without him, the defensive equation, the equilibrium that made them great, tilted from great to bad. So I think getting him back will actually help a lot, even though everyone makes fun of his shooting, and how can you not? But I mean, he's an awesome defensive player. He's one of the best defensive players in the league. I think you have the tier of Draymond, Kawhi, Gobert, and then maybe you want to throw in Anthony Davis and Giannis Antetokounmpo into that tier, or a slight step lower. But then after that, I think you've got Robertson. I think he's in like a tier with like Embiid. He's really great on defense. And yeah, the team, I don't think they're going to be elite or anything, but they have enough to be a really good regular season team when Westbrook's shenanigans don't really matter as much, when the fact that you have a total non-shooter doesn't hurt you as much. I think they could go up from 47 wins to 54. I think 7 wins that's a fair expectation for them. And I don't think they're going to make noise in the playoffs, really, again, because what can you really do with Westbrook as your best player, your spearhead, and Robertson on the court? Like, how valuable does he actually become in the playoffs when you can just totally ignore him and kind of muck up things for the other 4 players? But in the regular season, they should be a good team. I think they're going to clearly be better than they were last year. 3rd seed, I think Utah. Utah should be able to win in the mid to high 50s. 56, 57, 55, somewhere in that range. I don't think they're elite. Some people are saying they could win 60 games because of how unbelievable. I think it was after February was the turning point, right? Or maybe it was January, where they just went from a bleh team to world beaters who were just awesome. And of course, they beat Oklahoma City in the first round, which the casual fan didn't think was going to happen. It was the NBA nerds were kind of on it. Like, oh yeah, Utah's going to beat OKC. But the casual fans didn't see it coming. And the Jazz, they got beat by Houston. But Houston's awesome. Houston was historically brilliant last year. And the Jazz gave him more trouble than I expected, actually. And this year you have, Donovan Mitchell will be better. He was one of the best rookies I've ever seen last year. And he's going into his sophomore year. And nothing about him, to me, seems like the kind of guy who will even... Because there are some guys who, like Tyreek Evans, who were awesome as rookies, or Brandon Jennings, too, who were great as rookies, and they never got better from that point. The rookie year was their peak. And Donovan Mitchell doesn't strike me as that guy at all. And there are some rookies, I can't think of any really off the top of my head, but you know the type. The one who is great as a rookie, has a roadblock as a sophomore, and then kind of gets back on the gradual progression towards star. Donovan Mitchell doesn't strike me as that kind of guy either. He was about as NBA ready as anyone could hope to be last year. The fact that what he did in the playoffs was ridiculous. As a rookie, he was leading his team offensively against Russell Westbrook and Paul George. He was awesome. And I remember Zach Lowe said this on his podcast. Mitchell is the trump card, where when teams start to figure out Utah and they figure out all the screening and handoffs, Mitchell is the trump card who can say, here, this is the scheme you think is going to stop us. I can bust your scheme up. If you want to switch on me, I can just torch your switches. And I can just create something out of nothing, penetrate the defense when I want to, and make you have to do something different. You can't just use a scheme to totally strangle us like Houston kind of did last year in the playoffs. But I don't think, after all that praise, I don't think Utah is elite. It's always tough to look at the second half of a team's season and say, okay, because they were so good at the end, that means this is the new team. That they were in the past what they were at the beginning of the season, and they got better, and now they're still going to be that team next season because that's who they are now. You can't always do that. Sometimes teams just get hot at the right time, and that's why you still have to look at the totality of the season. It could just be kind of a statistical anomaly that they were so crazy because they average out to... It's tough to explain. I feel like I'm doing a bad job at this, but you can't look at the extreme, even though it happened at the end of the season, and say that that's the team, because it could just be random variance. And the middle, with which you take the bad beginning and the great end, that middle point between them, which they ended up averaging out to, that could just be the real team. And it's funny because we always talk about teams like the 2013 Knicks, where they were awesome at the beginning of the season, then faltered out. We say, oh yeah, that's because the statistics averaged out. They weren't actually as good as they were in the beginning of the season. But we don't do that with teams at the end. We tend to say, because it happened at the end and more recently chronologically, we say, oh, they changed. That's not a statistical anomaly. They changed. They're a better team now. But on the flip side, you have teams like, I remember the Celtics, 2014-15, they traded for Isaiah. They went on a storm, made the playoffs, and then the next year, they weren't quite as good as their pace when they were pushing into the playoffs, if I remember right. But they were only a little worse. They were still a lot closer to that than they were their low. But then again, that's there was a trade that changed that team dramatically. The fact that they got a creator like Isaiah Thomas. Utah didn't make a trade when they got better, but Derek Favors got healthy, and Rubio started playing a lot better. And Gobert, wasn't he hurt early in the season, and he kind of got right? So I believe in the Jazz. Because of that, I think it improved Rubio and a healthy Favors finally. And they did actually make a trade. They got Crowder. They dropped Rodney Hood and got Jay Crowder, and he really helps them. The fact that they have the flexibility to go small, and the fact that they're not married, they're not stuck to the idea of Favors and Gobert together, he helps that team a lot. They have a ton of flexibility. I believe in the Jazz. They're going to be a mid to high 50s win team. And it's crazy to say because a summer ago, when they lost Gordon Hayward, we said, oh, this is a disaster. And you know what? They've rebounded pretty well. I think it's time to start mentioning Utah as one of the best organizations in the league. I think we're at the point where we can kind of safely say that now. Shout out to Chris. He's a Jazz fan for some reason. I didn't mean that. I didn't mean to disparage you, Jazz fans, but it's just he lives nowhere near Utah. He lives on the East Coast, and he's a Jazz fan. Anyways, 2, second seed, I'm going to go with... I see no reason why it's not going to be Houston again. I know they lost Ariza and Mbah Moute, who were really important to their team. I don't know how many people realize, but that 3-headed monster on the perimeter of Ariza, Mbah Moute, and Tucker is, other than the fact that you obviously have kind of a big 3 there with Harden, Paul, and Capella, those 3 guys are what made that team super special. And they lost that. They have one of the 3 now. And the one that they have is probably the worst shooter out of any of them. And he definitely has a slow release as well, that's for sure. But he's a tough player. I love all 3 of those guys. Tucker might be my favorite, personally. Just aesthetically, he was so gritty and ballsy against the Warriors in the playoffs last spring. He was great. He was really freaking awesome. But when you don't have Ariza Mbah Moute, you go from having this almost like battalion of great 3-and-D wings to only one. And that's a real loss. Everyone wants versatile wings. Everyone wants a star, a secondary star, a rim runner, and then surround them with 3-and-D wings. That's the recipe. If your stars are both perimeter players, which in the modern NBA they typically are. And they don't have that anymore. But they still have James Harden. He's one of the superstars. Like we talked about with Westbrook, James Harden is a superstar, and he's a lot better than Westbrook. Chris Paul, star, secondary star. He was great. In limited minutes, he was awesome. It's just when you play him longer, he kind of wears down. But in the regular season, they don't have to worry about that. Capella is really good. I'm not sure I keep saying this, but I'm not sure a lot of people realize Capella was so important to them last year. What he did as a rim runner, as a defender, and his ability to read the pick and roll with Harden improved greatly. He was fantastic last year. And then you have kind of the system that they play, the way they play with this uber math. They take the money ball thing and just bring it to an extreme that we had never even conceived of really before. It was all theoretical. We said, oh, wouldn't it be crazy if a team shot 53s a game or whatever? Wouldn't it be insane if a team did that? Would that work? Would anyone have the balls to do that? Maybe in 15 years we could see that. And the Rockets just said, no, we're doing that right fucking now. If that's a good idea, we're doing it now. And they stretched it to an almost cartoony extreme, and it fucking worked, at least for them. I mean, and there's some argument to be made whether that failed in the playoffs because of the strategy or just because they got a bad break and the math didn't work out for them in that one instance. And I don't know if we'll ever be able to answer that. We'll never really know for sure. But one thing's for sure is that strategy worked in the regular season. It worked swimmingly. They won 65, even with injuries last year. And they should still be a great offense. They should still be an elite offense, a blistering offense, even without those guys. Because Mbah Moute didn't help a ton on offense. His value was more defense. And Ariza was too. Ariza's shooting will be missed. But, I mean, they have some shooters. Like, can James Ennis just kind of masquerade as Trevor Ariza? How will Carmelo fit? But they should be able to hold in the regular season. They should be a firm 2 seed, I think. And you can make the argument that they could win 60 games again. They're definitely going to be in that range, I think, around like 59, 60. I think that's right where I have them. I see the argument for why you would say they're going to win more, because Ariza and Mbah Moute, first of all, you could say they were still awesome without Mbah Moute in the playoffs. You can make that argument. You could say Ariza's a loss, but is he more than 5 wins of a loss? I don't know. Especially in the regular season, TBD, we'll see. And they still have Harden and Chris Paul. And Capella. Those are the 3 guys that drive the team. Harden was the MVP last year. And when you have those 3 guys, plus the kind of system that they play, that could just be enough. And presumably they're going to have all 3 of those guys for the whole season. We're not going to have to see the stats of, when Harden, Capella, and Paul actually play together, this is their ungodly record. We don't have to see that as a stat anymore. We're hopefully going to actually see them get some injury luck and have all 3 of those guys playing the vast majority of the season. And you could make the argument that they're not going to fall off that much from last year. But when it comes down to it, I think they're going to be around 60 wins. I think 60 wins is a perfect number for them, just because they lost some of their key guys, and Chris Paul's a year older, and I'm not sure James Harden is going to go balls out like he did last year. I'm not sure of that, because remember last year he was almost like on a quest because he had been wronged, never awarded the MVP, even though I deserve it. It's been 4 years now where I should have been the MVP. So now I'm going to show everyone, take what's rightfully mine. He did that now. He has his MVP. And by the way, I don't think he ever deserved it before this year. 2015, when, everyone associated with the Rockets thinks that he should have won over Curry. No, I think Curry was the clear choice. He no way in hell should have won in 2016. Harden didn't even make an All-NBA team that year. Which is crazy to think about. The fact that there's just this gap in his prime where he wasn't even on an All-NBA team, and he wasn't hurt. And then 2017, he was definitely over Westbrook for me, but I don't think he was over Kawhi. I think Kawhi should have won. But whatever. So he wins in 2018. He's done it. He's got his MVP. He's finally proven, got the recognition he thinks he deserves. And now, hopefully he can kind of take it easy now. He doesn't have to go balls out trying to prove that he can win an MVP. He can take take a few games off. Make sure he's great for the playoffs, because he knows now they can have one of the best regular seasons in the history of the league, and that doesn't mean that they're going to win the championship, especially against Golden State. So, I don't know. I think we're going to see actually not less engaged, that's the wrong word, but a James Harden that's not trying to go balls to the wall every possession. And that kind of brings me to number 1, the Golden State Warriors. I think they're clearly going to be the 1 seed. You got to remember, they had a lot of chemistry issues in the regular season last year. They're talking about how, you guys don't realize how hard it was to deal with that slog of a regular season for the 4th time in a row. We just want the playoffs to get here. I get that. They had some issues with Durant. All these reports came out after that. He was just like depressed almost. But here's the thing. They're getting Curry for the full season, presumably. Curry he only played like 55 games or something like that last year. And they should have him for essentially the full season. And just that enough. Just that alone. They won 58 missing Curry for all those games. And then I haven't even mentioned DeMarcus Cousins yet. It's tempting to say that we shouldn't get excited about a big man coming off an Achilles injury. But I will say, after I saw that Tom Haberstroh piece that he did for Bleacher Report, that video thing he made, which if you haven't seen it, I would definitely recommend watching it, about how players from coming back from Achilles tears, it's not as destructive an injury as we think. And DeMarcus Cousins could be back a lot sooner than we think, and back at full strength. And he's the variable where if he's Boogie Cousins again, they're going to win 60, 62, 63 pretty easily. But even without that, I think just having Curry kind of playing he's not going to play 80 games, obviously. Steve Kerr likes to rest his guys, but having him play 73 is a lot better than 55. And just that should be worth 4 wins I would say. And Durant, I get the vibe that Durant's not going to be as lost as he was last year. I can't explain it. It's not kind of any empirical or analytical information that makes me say that, but I just kind of get the vibe that Durant's not going to be literally depressed like he was last year. And there's a lot of buzz that he's going to leave after the season. And if that's true, and he is going to leave because he wants something greater, I think that actually means he's going to try harder. He's going to be like, yeah, let's fucking do this, get my 3rd title, and then go somewhere else and kind of celebrate my last year on this juggernaut. And if he is staying, if he's not leaving, that just means he's getting better acclimated to the team, I think. I just think when you break it down like that, he's not going to be as bad as he was last year. And even we say like, oh yeah, Durant wasn't that good last year. Durant was, there was a case that he should have been 5th for MVP that year. I say that year like it was last year. He was good. He was really good. Up until the very end, I had him 5th on my internal MVP ballot. And then my friend actually brought up Victor Oladipo and kind of made me think. I was like, whoa, no one's talking about Oladipo. I think Oladipo's 5th, and that made me push Durant off. But yeah, Durant was still great last year. He was playing some of the best defense of his career, especially early on. Like that Christmas game against the Cavs was awesome. And even though I mean, he obviously fouled LeBron at the end of that game to get the win. But, I mean, the fact that he cared that much about D and the fact that he really took pride in his ability to dominate on both ends. I mean, yeah, I don't need to tell you. Kevin Durant's awesome. I shouldn't have to explain that. We all know. He's, at worst, the third best player in the league. At worst. Most people would have him second next to LeBron. And nobody beats LeBron. So, yeah, I think that should be enough. Durant being more engaged and Curry playing more games. And then you have the X factor of Boogie. I think this team will clearly be number one. I think they're going to win 62 plus would be my bet. If I had to nail them down on a number, I'd probably say 63 maybe. Which is crazy to say, actually, because the way I have it laid out, there are going to be 3 60-win teams in the NBA, which doesn't often happen between Boston, Golden State, and Toronto. And I think because the middle class in the West is so loaded, I think that means we're going to see some real low win totals from the teams that are actual doormats. And then I think that middle class in the East is going to suffer. Teams like New York and Brooklyn and Detroit and Charlotte, they could be a little lower on the win-loss than we expect. Yeah, so Golden State, I think, will be number one. And what you guys all want to know is, do I think Golden State is going to win the championship again? Because ultimately, the regular season standings are nice, but the end goal is the title. And when it comes to the Warriors, I don't see a challenger in the West. There are people who are saying, oh, Houston could still be good. They could still challenge them. They almost beat them last year. That was last year's team. You cannot get away with James Ennis and Carmelo Anthony against the Warriors. You need Ariza, Mbah a Moute, and Tucker if you're going to beat those guys. And if Cousins is Cousins by the playoffs, no way. The Warriors they have no peer in the West. In the East, as a Celtics fan, I want the Celtics to win. I want to say that the Celtics can dethrone the Warriors. But I can't pull the trigger on it. Just the way I came to that realization was just think about the players. The 2 stars on each team, Kyrie and Hayward, and Curry and Durant. Durant is way better than Hayward. Hayward's great. Durant is way better. Kyrie's awesome. Love Kyrie. Curry's better. Clearly. By a pretty big margin, actually. And then you think about the third guy. Love Al Horford. He's not as good as Draymond Green. He's not. Then you think about Klay Thompson and Jason Tatum. I don't know. Klay's probably going to be better than Tatum, especially if Tatum has to take more of a backseat role than a typical kind of blossoming star would. I think, and Klay fits so perfectly with that team. And then the only real advantage is Jaylen Brown over Iguodala. But if Cousins is Cousins, then there's no advantage in the starters. None whatsoever that the Celtics have. And that's, when you boil it down, it's like, yeah, the Celtics might play really well as a team. They complement each other perfectly, but the Warriors' talent is just so overwhelming. And the Warriors play great together, too. That's the thing that I think sometimes people forget about the Warriors when they talk about, oh, they just stack talent and they've ruined the league. If it was different players of equal caliber to the guys they have, they wouldn't be dominating the league like this. It's because they have absurd talent and they play They all complement each other, and they all play the right way. And they're brilliantly coached. Steve Kerr is an excellent coach. He's given them a great system to allow their talents to flourish even more than they would in any other system. So, yeah, I don't see the Warriors losing this year, barring an injury. If Curry or Durant goes down in the playoffs, yeah, I can definitely see it. But as it stands now, the Warriors are going to be your 2019 NBA champions. The more interesting thing to me is how good will they be next season and the season after that. And if you ask me, if I had to put money on it right now, I would bet that Durant's gone after this year. I don't know where he's going, but just kind of the vibe. I mean, I act like I know Durant personally, or like I'm some sort of NBA insider, but just from me being like an armchair psychologist, I feel like Durant's out of there. He just seems like, from all the stories that you read, that he thought winning a championship with the Warriors would stop the hate. He realized it didn't. And then he got depressed. And then they slogged their way to a second championship. It didn't stop the hate. And I just think at this point he's going to say, I want something greater. The title itself, the material object of the championship, the ring, the fact that it says 3 times champion on my list of career accolades when I'm all said and done, just that material value is not fixed. It's not the jewelry that matters as much as it is the journey and the way you get that jewelry. You look at someone like Dirk Nowitzki, the way that he got that ring makes it so much more special. If Dirk was, even if he was still the best player, if Dirk was on a team like Golden State and they were just so stacked that they were annihilating the league, he wouldn't have gone to the locker room and cried. That he wouldn't have needed a moment alone and have been near inconsolably overwhelmed by the emotion. That wouldn't have happened. And maybe the first time he still would have been elated to have won, but it wouldn't have been the same. And he probably would have had a similar reaction to the Warriors players when they won last year, where they weren't overjoyed. It wasn't your typical celebration where the first time you could see Durant and Curry, and seeing Durant's mom just scream and run onto the court, that was so touching. But that didn't happen a second time. They weren't enthralled with the victory. Only really the role players were. The stars weren't. And I think Durant's starting to realize that I want something greater. I want to experience what Curry experienced in 2015. I want to experience what LeBron experienced 3 times over. I want to lead my team to victory. And I think he's out of there. I really do think he's gone. I don't know where he's going, but I think at this point in his life, he values the journey more than the title. And I don't know if that's even so far from what he always valued. I mean, even when it happened, I think that the reason he went to Golden State was it was a great opportunity. It's tough to pass up a team that stacked and the chance to dominate the league. But I still think that the main reason he went there, and I thought this at the time too, after I kind of got over the initial shock, and and boy was it shocking, but I think he was really won over by their culture and the style that they played and the camaraderie. And I thought he looked at that, and because this is what I would have done. I would have looked at that and said, wow, that's really fucking special. The fact that you guys all play the right way, you guys have unbelievable chemistry, you share the ball, you laugh, love, and cry all together in these games. I want that. I haven't gotten that in my career. I've done the individual stuff. I've never had this. And I think that's why he went there in the first place. And I kind of think that's still what he wants today. But I'm not Durant. I can't speak on this as an authority. I'm just giving you what I think just from watching him. Feel free to make fun of me if I'm wrong. Feel free to come back to this and call me names or whatever. I can take it. Yeah, I guess it feels weird to, after kind of going on this spiel about titles and how much it's worth, it feels weird to kind of go backwards and talk about, the 8 and 9 seeds in the West and, how much that matters. Because overall, none of these teams are contenders. They're not making the conference finals, but I mean, it's going to be fun to talk about anyway. So yeah, this is probably what you guys all wanted to come here and see. Who do I think is going to be 5 through 8 in the West? So let's go through the contenders. You have the Lakers. You have Portland. You have New Orleans. You have Minnesota. You have Denver. You have San Antonio. You have Memphis. And you have the Clippers. Now, I think the best way to do this is start from the top. Who do I think... Actually, no, I think we should cut off the bottom first. Because I'm not going to lie, I'm still kind of indecisive. I'm still thinking about it as I speak. Because it really is a tough decision. I'm not married to... I've put in every possible permutation of these teams in my head, and I'm not happy with any of them. But that's not what you guys want to hear. You guys want to hear my picks so you can make fun of me later and call me an idiot. So I think the teams that we can kind of cut off, and before I should say this, we all know 1 or 2 or 3 of these teams are going to have injuries and get knocked off. And that's ultimately what's going to decide this race, is which team stays healthy, which team doesn't. But assuming health, I think the teams that are kind of on the low end that are good, and I think will be above 500 for sure, but just not quite good enough to be in that 48 win tier with the actual playoff teams, I think are going to be the Clippers and Memphis. They just don't quite have it. The Clippers, I like that team. I love Beverly. The fact that they're getting him back for the full season helps. The fact that, oh my God, I'm totally blanking on his name. The center, the athletic center, who he played bench, and I think he came from Kentucky, right? Like 3 years ago. Oh my God, I'm totally blanking on this guy's name. Whatever, you know who I'm talking about. The guy who, the center who plays on the Clippers, who was really good last year. I think he'll be an upgrade over what DeAndre gave them last year. And, they have Beverly back. They have Lou Williams back. They should be a fun, gritty team. They don't have any star that moves the needle. And I'm sorry, but at the end of the day, that matters. You have to have the star when you're going against teams like the Lakers and New Orleans to try to make the playoffs. I just don't quite see it. I hate to say it too, because that team has a lot of players that I like. I've always been a huge Gallo fan, even if he's not the same. But yeah, I would feel I feel more comfortable saying they'll miss it than saying they'll make it. So cut out the Clippers. I think you got to cut out Memphis too, unfortunately. I love Conley and Gasol as much as everyone. They're great. I just don't quite see it. And we talk about injuries too. This is a team where you almost do kind of have to factor those in just because Conley and Gasol always get hurt, or one of them seemingly always gets hurt. And they might trade Gasol. You never know. This could finally be the year where, let's say Gasol goes down again. They're like, you know what? It's over. We're trading Conley, we're trading Gasol, and we're bottoming out. That could happen. That could very well happen. So I think Memphis are actually probably the safest team to say they're not going to make it, which feels weird to say because for so long it was, Memphis are a lock. If those two guys, even as recently as 2017, if they have Conley and Gasol, they're a lock, and they're not anymore. Next, I got to say San Antonio. I think they're out. I'm not a huge DeMar guy. DeJounte Murray's out for the year. I think because DeJounte Murray's out and they just have no wings, no point guard, they have a lot of traditional bigs. I get that Pop is a genius, but I do not see it at all for the Spurs. I think the Clippers actually have a better chance to make it than the Spurs. At this point today, I think the Spurs are probably 13th 12th in the West. I think other than Phoenix and Dallas, they're the worst. And they could tank, actually. They could tank and be even worse. But as it stands right now, I don't think they're going to tank. I think Pop and DeMar and Aldridge want to win. And they're just not, they just don't quite cut it. They're too thin, especially with the Murray injury. So I would say Spurs are 12th, Memphis probably 11th, and the Clippers 10. So now one more team to not make it between Minnesota, the Lakers, New Orleans, Portland, and Denver. And you know what? You might say this is a biased pick. I know if any of my friends are listening who know where my allegiances lie, they're going to say this is a little biased. And the caveat is health, right? I said that before. This is barring health. I think New Orleans is in. I think Davis is too good. I think Holiday is a great complementary piece, and he's really good. He's underrated when he's healthy, when he's on. And I think Anthony Davis is going to win the MVP. I've said that before, not in a podcast form or anything, but I've said that for a while, in my own private life. I think Anthony Davis is going to win the MVP. He's so good. I don't want to turn this into an Anthony Davis fawning session, but I think he's better than Durant. He's the second best player in the league. He's unreal on defense. He's completely unstoppable on offense. He's fucking special. He really is. I got to stop myself. Anthony Davis, I think, is enough to get them to the playoffs. And then that begs the question, who do I think is out? I don't think the Lakers are out. They have LeBron. I think LeBron, even though he's not going to bring it game to game like he once did, I think LeBron is enough. And that team, Ingram looks really good. Ball has an improved jump shot. And they have some veteran pieces who can kind of fill in when the young guys don't have it that night. And then when the young guys have it, they can ride the young guys. I think the Lakers are going to make the playoffs. At first, I didn't think so. When I first thought about that team in my head when LeBron first signed there. I'm like, they're not even going to make the playoffs. But the more I think about it, the Lakers are in. I think Portland is probably in. They won 48 last year. Dame and CJ. The fact that they've kind of... They're almost... It seems like they're resigned to the fact that they have to change some stuff and kind of, juice up their offense a little bit, because I think they get at this point that they're figured out. I would say Portland is going to make it. I would say, and I think Denver are probably safe as well, because it just, every sign seems to point to a Murray leap. And remember, they won like 46 games last year. They were barely out. And if Murray makes a leap, you have healthy Millsap. I think they could be the clear 5 seed, actually. So then that leaves Minnesota out looking in. And this actually is not anything to do with the Butler trade. I had them out before that, actually. And on my notes, it actually said, this is from like weeks ago, on my notes next to Minnesota, it says possible trade with exclamation points, and it's underlined. And now, obviously, that seems more and more imminent. But even if they don't trade him, I'm a believer that the chemistry of that team looks so awful when your two best players hate each other. And this isn't Shaq and Kobe, where they're both so awesome and Phil can kind of rein them in. This is not that. This is different. They are nowhere near Shaq and Kobe. And even Shaq and Kobe, they weren't good in the regular season. They weren't a great regular season. They turned it on in the playoffs. I don't see it. And Minnesota does not have a good coach. It pains me because I have always loved Thibodeau, but he's stuck in 2011. It's not working. Wiggins is not that good. I've never been a massive Jeff Teague fan. Tibbs doesn't play the bench at all, so it's almost not worth mentioning them. It's just, I don't like that team. Something about them doesn't pass the sniff test. I don't love them. I don't love them. And to be honest, that's the only reason I have Portland in, because I'm not huge on Portland either. That season in 2016 where they surprised everyone, and I think they won 50 games that year, actually, and everyone thought they were going to be like a 25-win team. That team was awesome. I loved that team. I watched them whenever I could get a chance. They were a delight, but they're not as good anymore, and they play with, they have this air about them. It's very Wizards-esque with Dame and CJ, where they think they're so awesome. They're like, oh yeah, we're a championship contender. They're not. Everyone knows they're not. You'd have to be delusional. And Dame has the John Wall thing where he's like, you guys need to respect me more. I finished 5th in MVP last year, I think, or maybe even 4th, which was ridiculous. Giannis should have been 4th, clearly above guys like Dame and DeMar. But, I finished 4th in MVP. This is ridiculous. I need more credit. I need to be thought of as Steph Curry and Russell Westbrook and Kyrie. No, you don't play defense whatsoever. You never have. You're worse than Wall. And, yeah, just stop, Dame Lillard. Be realistic for, like, once. Something about that team just bothers me. Their vibe. Ugh. And I just don't see them quite being good. And you know what? The more I think about it, the more I think about Portland and Minnesota, the more I think that the Clippers could actually sneak into the playoffs. I'm not betting on it, but the more and more I start to kind of think about it. But overall, I just don't think they have the star power. I think Minnesota and Portland are going to talent their way in. or Minnesota won't talent its way, but it'll talent its way above the Clippers. So yeah, and if I had to rank them, I would say Denver 5th, the Lakers 6th, New Orleans 7, and Portland 8. And I don't feel good about that at all. This is harder than last year. And last year's, in the moment, we were like, oh, this is crazy trying to pick the end of the West playoff teams. But it's absolute insanity this year. It's really freaking tough. And I'm sure I'll be wrong, because this is one of the only years where I don't really have confidence in these playoff picks. Even when it was as crazy as last year. And I had like the Clippers as the 6th seed last year. I was so confident in that. And and this year I'm not confident. So that should tell you something. But that's what I've got at the end of the day. So just to recap, if you weren't clear, Warriors 1, Rockets 2, Jazz 3, Thunder 4, Denver 5, Lakers 6, New Orleans 7, Portland 8. And yeah, that's it. I'm locking it in. Those are my picks. So thank you for joining me on part 2 of my NBA preview. If you haven't seen part 1, I would definitely appreciate that if you check that out. I kind of spoiled it a little bit, but hopefully you didn't catch that. Hopefully you still want to watch it. But yeah, a lot of the East was kind of interesting. You know, talking about teams like Miami and the Wizards was meh a little bit. But, I mean, talking about Philly and Toronto and Milwaukee, that was a fun time. So definitely check that out if you were a fan of this one. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave me a comment. Tell me what you thought. Feel free to come back in 8 months and call me an idiot. Whatever. You do you. So with that, that's episode 2 of the podcast Paradise. See you in episode 3 later.